And I didn't even switch on my microphone. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. I'll go away again, and then I'll come back in a moment. Hang on a second.
This division that you be the boss. Now I'd like to show you some of the valuable things your MCA disk division system lets you do. Most persons find it more convenient. Gently pull up as you press down on the center shaft with your thumb. You'll hear a click. Simply plug one jack into this outlet. How about that? Pretty easy, isn't it? Disk division. This red light comes on. Simply press stop. After I've stopped the action, you're going to practice using these buttons. The disk division player gives you many special capabilities. Stop, play, slow, forward and reverse.
Imagine a dog chasing a rabbit around a tree.
How can you get there in a hurry? Now you enter the number just like dialing a push-button telephone. 2, 6, 3, 2, 4, search. Disk division. By the way, notice that the sound cuts off when you're running at anything other than normal speed. Use one of the step buttons. One single frame of picture is now held on the screen for as long as you want. Take as much time as you want, you're in control. Here's step forward. You found me again. Welcome back. Simply press stop. Jack stops the disc and returns it to the bar position. I'm sure you'll find using your new MCA Disco Vision system to be rewarding and enjoyable. I thank you for watching.
Hello and good evening, good afternoon and good morning everyone, depending of course where you're watching from. We have an amazing amount of people in the chat. I welcome you all, this is so cool. Welcome Karen, welcome Bradford, welcome Christina, welcome Biscuits, welcome Rod 1 and Rod 2. This could indeed get confusing, this is exciting. But thank you so much, and of course thank you Christina for joining us today. It's marvelous. I always like getting comments on videos, but if this commenting kind of happens immediately while the stream is happening, that's just so cool. So thank you all for joining. Very exciting. I do have my coffee, and I don't know why I pressed the wrong button there. It's one of those things. I also don't really know where time is going. I can't believe it's 4 o'clock already. 10 past 4. The day just went by so quickly. Yes, I've received a question this week, and I thought I'm going to answer them here in the live stream because it's kind of a tricky project to set up. This was a question for Rumer Richman, and he wanted to know how to set up a third-person camera, or kind of a character with a camera behind him, like in third-person computer games in DAZ Studio. And I thought we can do that here, and that's what today is going to be all about. I've had an interesting week. First, I've had this copyright claim. I've already talked about this on my YouTube community tab there. I've done a video on my other channel explaining what happened there. I've used music by another musician, a friend of mine, and YouTube had filed a copyright claim against that, and still hasn't been resolved. So it's an interesting kind of gray area that I've tapped in there. I have legally had the right to use that music, and they've still flagged me, and it was kind of can't seem to shake it. So it's a weird one. So that happened, and another thing that happened, 3D related, is that there was I don't know if you're familiar with Hivewire 3D. They're a content store that's that sprang into action by Chris Creek and his partner. He used to work for DAZ 3D, and they fired him many years ago, and when new management started coming in, and he decided, I'm going to set up my own venture, and that became Hivewire 3D. And they're kind of a mix between Renderosity and DAZ 3D. And they also are content brokers. They have their own figure for both Poser and DAZ Studio called the Dawn figure. And they've got several animal figures. They even want to strike a deal with selling their stuff on DAZ, and that kind of went away. And it's all, it's a bit of a gray area there. Nice people, very nice people, good community spirit on the forum. And I used to have 2 products of mine on their store that are also on Renderosity. And this week they've notified me, hey Jay, listen, you've not made any sales last year. I think we're going to pull you as a vendor, and if ever you think you want to do more stuff, perhaps send us things, but until then we just really don't want to know. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's slightly disappointing. I mean, they are correct in that I've not actually made a sale there over the last year, but it's always on one hand it's a bit disheartening when that happens. At the same time, it's okay because that wasn't really doing anything for me. So yeah, that also happened. One of those things. I just thought I'd mention it. Good afternoon, Mr. Batsu, my neighbor from the larger Floridian area. Great to see you. And a warm and very, very special welcome to Bradford Knight today. He is my latest Patreon supporter, and that is just so exciting. Thank you so much, Bradford, for joining the group. We have quite a few Patreons now on board. Mr. Batsu is one of them. And I'd like to thank you all. Without your donations, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So there we go. Julia is here with me. She's playing a 20-year-old computer game on the PlayStation 3. And let us go to work here. So let me show you the comment thread that I had here on YouTube with Rumer. Rumer was interested. Where is it? There we go. Here, Rumer Richman. He was interested in creating this third-person perspective for DAZ Studio, and I'm not entirely sure. Have I? Have I loaded that? I've made a little, yeah, there we go. This is it. This is what it kind of looks like. This is the preview that I've just shown you on the community tab there. And this is how it's gonna work, kind of ish, I hope. Let me just switch that back into the smooth shaded view so that we can perhaps with my microphone is in the way of my keyboard. That's not good, is it? Control G to switch on the preview lights. Oh, look at that. That doesn't even work. What's happening here? That's not such a good start, is it? There we go. Perfect. That'll work. So the way I've set it up is that the character, it can be in the middle, it can be bigger or smaller, but in essence, we don't move the character, we move the camera. And with the character on there, we basically can do this, and now the character walks. But these are essentially two animations stacked on top of one another. So the first animation is an AniBlock that I've modified so that the character itself doesn't move forward anymore. And the second then is that kind of walking in place character parented to the camera, and the camera is then the one that moves forward. So let's see how we can make that happen. Oh yeah, and the background, so I'm kind of imagining the character walking through a city scene or through some other scene. I didn't want to overload my computer with too much stuff, so I just made something up with Ultrascatter. That is actually a tip from Mark Bremer from a Carrara tutorial that I've watched a few years ago, in which he basically created these greebles. And that's just a cube in kind of a randomized height variation, and that is how you can then tell the Ultrascatter kind of replicator, that's a replicator plugin for DAZ Studio, that you tell it replicate this thing along the bottom plane here, the bottom floor that we have here, and vary the height a little bit, and that makes for a very interesting background. So let me show you how to set all this up from scratch. Have I saved this? Yes, just in case. Yes, I don't know actually, Rod 1. Hey, we need to talk about naming specifications here. So we have Rod Shelley and we have got Rod Cock today. So I guess Rod Shelley is going to be Rod 1 and Rod Cock is going to be Rod 2. Is that cool? Let's do this. Let's do this. So Rod 1, have you had experiences with replicators inside Poser? Because it's one of those things I'm not entirely sure if they actually exist in Poser, or if solutions for Poser are available that are kind of that are replicators. Excellent, Rod and Rock. Osaka, good afternoon. Glad that you can join us. It's a very popular live stream today. I wish it was always like that. This is great. So thank you so much for everyone being here. I'm going to start by loading the Genesis 8 basic male figure here from the Smart Content tab. And I don't really know where these AniBlocks came from that are found in my library. I don't know if they are a product or if they come with the default DAZ assets. So do let me know if you have a look in your DAZ installation if you find AniBlocks for the Genesis 8 figure. They are technically for the Genesis 8 female figure, but at the same time it'll just work as well. He just walks a little bit girly, but you can try Genesis 8 female, of course, as well. So with our character loaded and selected, there is on the bottom left-hand corner here, that's where the whole aniMate stuff is happening. So this is a tab, the aniMate tab. I've got it open already. It's usually where the timeline tab is, and that's kind of usually at the bottom of the screen. But if this isn't open for you, you can always have a look under Window, Workspace, Panes, Tabs, and there's aniMate 2. aniMate, just to be clear about aniMate, it is a paid-for product. I believe DAZ Studio comes with aniMate Lite installed, but if you want to unlock the full version, you have to pay for that. But I believe these AniBlocks will work with the Lite version of aniMate, so that's good news. The aniMate Pro feature, I believe, only brings in things like MDD export and some advanced features that the Lite version doesn't have. But I believe aniMate block editing and all that, that's all in the regular version. So that's where to find it, just in case it's not open for you. So with aniMate open and with your character selected, there is this thing that you can, in the bottom right corner here, this is actually a drop-down menu. So the layout is terrible. I gotta be brutally honest with you. The layout is terrible, but aniMate's been around for some years, so therefore perhaps we can be forgiving as such. So there's a little drop-down menu here. If you open that, it opens the location in which your AniBlocks are installed by default. So this is the old aniMate plugin. The current one is, I believe, aniMate 2, and I've got a walk construction kit here. I've got some dance moves. You select that, and then at the very bottom you see some of these AniBlocks pop up. So these are kind of blue things that when you hover over them, your figure starts implementing that block. So an AniBlock, in case you're not aware of it, is a collection of keyframes that have been turned into a somewhat non-linear animation. And that's a very exciting concept, because it means you can drag these blocks to the timeline and then they blend into each other. You can also shorten them, you can elongate them, you can loop them. So that's what aniMate is all about. So it's very, ooh, look at that, look at him go. Very cool. So these are dance blocks. I don't think they're actually made for Genesis 8, but as if by magic, they work. So that's very exciting. It is cool, absolutely, Biscuits. It's very, very cool. So depending on what type of AniBlock you want to grab here, you can maybe fighting. We can do fighting and ooh, boom, punch him in the face. Come on. Oh, get ready to warm up. So this is all cool stuff, and it's you can spend hours exploring that. And very clever, very talented people make these AniBlocks from regular keyframe animations on the timeline. You specify a short block, and then you turn that into an AniBlock. That's the magic of it. I'm going to stick to the walks category here, and we have a few of them. We've got a corner left, corner right, and I can tell they're made for the Genesis 8 female. We also have the forward cycle. That's the one I'm going to be using for this demonstration. And we have a start, and then we also have a stop. So these blocks are designed, if you start from a standing position, then you'd use the start block, then you'd use the forward cycle, and then after a few cycles you'd use the stop cycle. So in game development, what happens is the moment you push the joystick forward, or you want the character to move forward, one of those things will be initiated, and then the start walk cycle begins, and then while the character is walking, the regular forward walk cycle begins. So in order to drag that onto our timeline, we can just pick any of these things up and just drag them on here. And that will show us that little red strip here. And that's not quite representative of the whole length of the AniBlock. You just have to drag it in there until this is red, and then you let it go. And then you see the full AniBlock. Right now, it's not actually at the beginning of my timeline, so it's one of those things you have to just manually move that there, and that's basically that. If you wanted to add other AniBlocks to it, you can just go and do that. You can drop them here, and then just slide them on next to one another, and that'll become your animation. So we don't need the start block here. I'm just going to demonstrate this with the regular. Oh my goodness, look at that. I've deleted my whole Genesis figure. That's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Let's bring that back. So let's go and... No, I've done it again, haven't I? Terrible. So if you want to delete a single AniBlock, don't use the backspace or delete key. Just right-click that and try somehow to get rid of it. I thought it was the backspace key. That's kind of throwing me now. How are we going to delete that? Well, perhaps with the trash can. There we go. Trash can icon, that's what it was. So backspace key removes everything, crazy, and the trash can icon removes the selected AniBlock. Hey, I've learned something new today. There we go. So currently the thing is, if I play my animation, then my character moves forward, and I don't really want that for my demonstration. I would like the character to move in place. So what I need to do is I need to adjust the AniBlock and take the Z movement out of it. So right now the red is X, the green is Y, translate, and the blue is translate on Z. So I need to remove the translate on Z part of the AniBlock. Let's see how we can do that. Let's stop this, and on the bottom left-hand corner, once again, we select that AniBlock with a single click. It already says that a double click will get us into the keyframe, so let's do that. Double click into that, and then the AniBlock or aniMate will change into the blue things at the top and blue things at the bottom, green things at the top thing. And that's kind of the key to success. There's one other piece of the puzzle that we need to address, and that's this icon here. And when you hover over it, it says open, close the graph editor. And the graph editor lets us open up, maybe I'm just going to make that a bit bigger here. If I click that, then I get a little context menu on the left hand side here. Right now it's set to hip, but I can open that and then I can see anything that's happening to the hip in regards to animation. So position XYZ, rotation XYZ, and then we go and drill down further into the figure, like left thigh bend, right thigh bend, abdomen lower, and so forth. So luckily we don't need to concern ourselves with that. All we need to do is select the position Z and remove it. So technically these are all the values that aniMate is using under the hood, and what we want to do is, since we're in keyframe mode, we can now add or delete keyframes from this whole magic that's happening behind the scenes there. So to do that, there's these three keys here. This is add a keyframe, this is set a zero keyframe, and this is remove all the selected keyframes. So that's what we need to do with the Z position selected. Let's do that. It'll ask us, are you sure you want to do that, because it's going to ruin things forever? And you say, yeah, that's perfect, let's do that. And let's see what happens when we now play back our animation. That's exactly what I was hoping for. It is in fact the figure moving in the same position with the same walk cycle, but it's removed the kind of the spatial translation to that. So that's good. That's exactly what we want. Now to get out of this, let's just go and click that graph editor button again. Ooh, Christina, thank you so much. That is very kind of you. Thank you. And look at this. I don't know if it's going to come up on the screen. This is one of those things. I'm on a 10-second delay here myself. There's a little animation that I've set up that in case this happens, yay, look at that. That is so cool. This is a service courtesy of Streamlabs. It's very exciting, and I will definitely enjoy that coffee. Thank you, Christina. Very exciting. Anyone who leaves a super chat now gets this little animation. It's very cool. It wasn't working up until last week, so I'm so happy it is now working. Yes, that is cool. How exciting is that? So with a bit of coffee, maybe this is a good time for us all to take a sip. I know Rod 1 likes coffee. Christina likes coffee. Biscuits, what are you? Are you a coffee drinker? I believe Holland is kind of a coffee country, isn't it? I believe so. So we've got our man running in the same spot, and that's good. Let's go ahead and unselect that graph editor. Rod 2 loves coffee too. I love it. We all love coffee. We get out of that. We get back into this menu here, which we can close down again. And this little icon, that's another icon here I wanted to let you know about. It's the exit keyframe mode. That's that we could double click the AniBlock. That would get us into keyframe mode, and this thing will get us out of it. And just clicking on the timeline will just bring that AniBlock back to what it was before, i.e. like an uneditable AniBlock just lying on the timeline there. So one AniBlock is indeed totally fine, but what we can also do is we can copy this block and put a couple of them one after one another. So then we have a longer walk cycle. If we wanted to have a longer animation in which we pan the camera, then we can do that. And the way to do that, I suppose I'll switch the animation off there for a second, is to click on this block once and then right click on it. And then we have the copy command here. If I do this just by right-clicking on the green block, by the way, the copy command doesn't come up. So I don't know if this has not been tested properly or whatnot. It's just you have to click onto it once and then you right-click, and that's where you get that context menu for copying that AniBlock. And now you can, next to that AniBlock, you can right-click again and go paste. And that'll paste the same AniBlock that we've just adjusted without the Z motion into the onto the timeline. Let's do that one more time. Just right click and paste that same thing again. That'll work, but of course now we have these gaps in between the AniBlocks, and we don't really want that to happen. So I don't know, there may be a way to do this more elegantly. I don't know of a way to do that, so I'm just going to go and move these so that these gaps are gone. And now if I play my timeline back, you can see that when the playhead moves from one block to the next, everything is fine and the animations kind of blend into one another. Espresso, wow, that's hardcore. Very good, very good. I do agree, tea is great too. I used to live in London for 13 years and I have come to appreciate how good a good cup of tea can be. Julia still likes tea, so yeah, we're kind of, I'm more of a coffee man, but in the evenings we do share a tea sometimes. So and Julia is just like, you know, tea all the way. Very cool. So with our man walking, let's see how we can make it so that the camera is now behind him at all times, no matter where we move him. So my idea for this was that the camera is going to be kind of at the back of this guy. Let's see if I can make that happen. So this is still the perspective view that I'm using here. And I can probably close my timeline. I don't need to see that anymore. Perhaps I'm going to bring up the aspect frame so that I can see the 16:9 aspect frame. That's kind of how I want to frame him up. Also, perhaps I'm going to give him some clothes. What do you think? That's a good idea. He doesn't have to be naked. I'm going to opt for the basic wear outfit here. That's everybody. Whoops, everybody has that. So I think we're just going to give him the basic wear outfit. There. Let's not give him. Whoops. Let's not give him hair here. And create a camera that kind of looks at him like that. It really depends at this point how you want to position him in the camera. I've seen many games that have the character slightly off to the side and just show the top part, the shoulder, so it's kind of an over-the-shoulder thing. Games like Tomb Raider, they position the character a bit like this, so that the character in its full glory is kind of in the frame, and it's kind of up to you how to do it. I like the idea of seeing more of the top of the character, so I'm going to go and frame it up like this, perhaps. That leaves us enough room to see the scene, and we can make adjustments later. It's just one of those things, you know, it's kind of up to you how you frame that camera, and it's important to make a decision before you parent the character to the camera. So let's leave him like this in this example for this demonstration, and go create a new camera, either from here, that's create new camera, or you can use that little icon here that also creates a camera. And when you select either of them, you get this dialog here, in which you can say apply default settings. That's not what we want. I'm going to go and copy the active view, which in my case is the perspective view. And perhaps we can also give it a name. Maybe I'll call it third person. Hit accept, and that's our camera in vision. And now let's go and, while we're still in the perspective view, let's have a look at where that is in relation to the character. So this is what it looks like. And it's kind of interesting to visualize that. The moment we parent the character to the camera, then start the animation, the character is going to walk in place just in front of the camera, and that'll be the animation we see. Then we go ahead and just move the camera, and the character is always going to be in the same distance before the camera, while everything else around the camera is going to change. So that's how that's going to work. So right now, if we go and just basically do nothing, just go and drag the Genesis 8 male onto the third person camera. That's really all we needed to do here. And then make sure you don't move the character anymore. Now select the third person camera. Perhaps I'm going to go and call that actually third person camera. Otherwise it's a third person in my scene. Perhaps I'm going to get confused in my old age here. So let's call that camera. There we go, third person camera. And now we can move that camera around, and the character is going to be in the same position from the camera at all times. That's exactly what we want. I'm going to go and undo that, Control Z, because I don't know exactly which frame on the timeline I was on, and I don't want to accidentally create a keyframe there. That's kind of a big trap that we all fall into when we do animations with DAZ Studio. As soon as you change a parameter of the selected object, that will automatically create a keyframe in DAZ Studio. So for this is now not an AniBlock technique anymore. This is now a thing that is a general keyframe. So therefore we can't use the aniMate timeline anymore. We need to use our regular timeline. So go and select that, and on it we can see at which position we are. I think our whole animation has about, there we go, 108 frames. We're on frame 50, and I can see, lucky for me, that I haven't selected a keyframe there. So if I wanted to pick my starting position of the camera, I must make sure that this playhead is on the first frame here. And you can see what happens. My character is still moving in place. That's exactly what I want. But the camera is currently not moving. Also kind of what I want, because I haven't decided on where that camera is going to move yet. So there we go. Let's go and move that playhead to the very beginning here. And with that in place, I believe that's enough. I always like to just click that plus button again and go boom, and that'll lock in that keyframe. Ooh, Rod, thank you so much for the $1. That's very exciting. Next coffee is on you. Do you also get that funky animation? Come on, let's see it. Let's see it. Yes, look at that. Animation is happening. This is so cool. Thank you so much, Rod. Very encouraging. And I love these animations too. That is just absolutely exciting. Ah. Yay, Rod Shelley donated $1. This is cool. This is seriously cool. Thank you. So, with that tough work out of the way, let's see if we can now position the camera to somewhere kind of further over here on the first frame. And then as we get closer to the end of our animation, perhaps somewhere let's use frame 108. Let's select that camera again and move it forward. Now the thing is, because there's no relation between the distance that the character has traveled and the distance that I've just moved the camera, I'm not entirely sure if this is going to look good or not. So we can always check what this is going to be like, either from the side here. Yeah, I think the character walks a little bit too slow, yet the camera walks a little bit fast. So it's perhaps on that last frame, we need to make sure that camera hasn't quite traveled so far, perhaps just until here. This is just, guessing. There we go. I can kind of work with that. I can live with that. That's cool. That's believable. If we had a jog cycle or run cycle, that would also look really cool. So that's a good start here. That's a good start. Let's have a look what this looks like through the third-person camera. In fact, there we go. Let's play that animation, and there we go. Third-person view of a guy walking, well, in an empty scene right now. So that's kind of the hard work out of the way. So you can imagine if this was an object in a game engine, then this is the walk cycle with the travel distance that would be applied as soon as somebody hits the go forward button, either on the keypad or on the keyboard or whatnot. So that's the hard work kind of out of the way. But the more important thing that we can now do is, if we would neglect the animation here for a second, if I just go and go to the last frame, it doesn't really matter. Let's stick on the, let's be on frame 50, so I can just go and delete that keyframe later. The cool thing now, with the third-person camera selected, the keyboard and mouse navigation shortcuts still apply in DAZ Studio. So even though we won't see the animation, because my third-person view is now selected, I can now use, with this icon up here selected here, that's the toggle the keyboard navigation on. And there's another one, which is this one here. This is, if I select this one, the Scene Navigator tool. I think, is it that one? I think it's that one. If I click that, then I can go and use the A, S, and D keys and the W key to move through the scene. So if we actually had something in the scene now, that would look really awesome, because I can pick my scene, and you can see how effective this can be to pick the exact location of what you'd like to look at. So if you imagine the grid is my scene, you can now look around with the mouse by holding down the left mouse button, Make sure this thing is selected here, the scene navigator. That means you can look around like in a first person or third person shooter game. All the while you can move. With W you can move forward, with S you can move back, and with A and D you can move left and right respectively. And then you can also move up and down with Q and E. There we go. I'm going to go and delete that keyframe again. Hopefully I'm going to be successful with that. There we go. And that means our animation is now still intact. I just wanted to let you know that this is still possible. If you've set up the way your character is envisioned and now you're trying to find the position of what you're actually looking at, that's still going to work. And this is also applicable to things that are not characters. So if you have something that is kind of, I don't know, from the inside of a cockpit looking out, then you can parent the whole cockpit scene to the camera and then use the camera to look through, and then the whatever cockpit overlay is always going to be on top of your scene. So very clever tip. So let's build the man a little bit of a scene that he can walk through. Yes, that can happen, Biscuit. The idea is that you would create your animation as regular keyframes first, and then you turn that into an AniBlock, and that'll be reusable. So usually what happens is you could say the figure starts walking, and then that's like the start block, and then you have the walk forward block, and then you could have a walk forward while turning the head left block. You could add that to that. And yes, I might make a video of that, explaining that a little bit more in detail, how to work with aniMate. So there's a lot to aniMate, and it's a very old kind of, it hasn't been looked at for a while, sadly, but it's still very, very powerful, and it's as close to non-linear animation as it gets in DAZ Studio. Yes, you can save your own AniBlocks, Christina. That is possible. I think once like mine, that's now amended here. These are amended AniBlocks. I believe I can just go ahead and right click on it and say save as new. And there's also save for legacy aniMate. So the aniMate went through two stages. There was aniMate, that was like 15-20 years ago. Then there was aniMate Plus, that was fairly short-lived, and then there was aniMate 2, and that's what we still have today. So aniMate 2 itself is already over 10 years old, and that is what you'd use, save as new. And then if you figure out the location of where these AniBlocks are stored, they'll come up here and you can select them from there. That's how that works. So let's go and bring in, with our timeline here, with our camera on frame 0, let's bring in a regular plane so that we have something like a floor that the guy can walk on, and more importantly a floor that we can replicate these greebles on. Let's try and see if and how that's possible, shall we? So first of all, let's create a primitive that's up here with this little icon here, create a new primitive, or you can use create new primitive. Either one will work fine. It'll come up with a little context menu here in which we can select if we want what type of primitive we want. So in our case, we're going to use a plane, and plane size 20 meters, 20, 30 meters. Let's make it 30 meters. Divisions doesn't matter. It doesn't have to have any kind of geometry. And Y positive means that the Y will point up and the plane is going to lie flat on the floor. Let's use that. And there it is. It's almost not quite. Hello, Captain Slaymore. Nice to meet you. Very good to join. Very good of you to join us today. This is our plane. And with our plane selected, we can now, it doesn't actually have to be set, it doesn't have to be selected. Let's go and create a cube. And the cube is going to be the item that'll be replicated along the plane. So let's go and create a new primitive. In this case will be a cube. And the cube, we're going to make that thin and slim. So perhaps we'll start with 1 meter. Let's start with 2 meters. 2 meters is fine. Let's do that. And that's it. I'm going to switch back to my perspective view so I can mess around with the cube a little bit. Right now I don't see my 3D manipulator, and that's because I've switched into the scene navigator earlier. So if we go and switch this over again to the universal tool, then I'll see my manipulator again. There we go. Just in case this ever happens to you and you think, "Ooh, where's my widget gone?" You probably have selected a different tool there. So this thing is the universal tool, and that's usually doing a good job for me here. I'm going to go and make that, I'm going to leave the height as it is. I'm just going to go and make that slimmer like so and scale it in a bit. And this is kind of just a prototype here. It doesn't even matter where exactly it is. Perhaps we're going to just move it off to the side so that we can have a path along which the figure can walk. So let's see how we can do that. With the cube selected, this is where Ultrascatter Pro comes in. Howie Farkes, super phenomenal replicator plugin for DAZ Studio. Howie Farkes, just in case you don't know the man, he's you find it in the content library under scripts. Comes up with a little folder here, Ultrascatter. There's two versions, Ultrascatter Advanced and Ultrascatter Pro. Pro is the later version. He's added some more features. And so Howie Farkes used to work with hello Dion. Hello Dion, nice to meet you. Thank you Biscuits for €2.29. This is exciting. Thank you so much. Awesome. And you'll get that amazing animation, of course, which we're all looking forward to. I always love it coming. I don't get the preview. I see it when it comes back. So it's kind of on a 10-second delay for me. But awesome. Thank you so much. It's coffees all around. Woo-hoo. That is cool. That is seriously cool. Maybe one day I'll be able to make the dancing alien from Poser and apply some AniBlocks to him and build my own animation for him. I think that's what I want to do next, because I can render this as an animation on a transparent background, and when this happens, that should be triggerable. So let's see what happens in the future. Awesome. For now we have the walking zombie. So Howie Farkes, right, Howie Farkes used to work a lot with Carrara, and he was one of those guys. He was a master at that. Carrara and Howie Farkes, if you've ever seen any of these scenes, that's what got me into Carrara. And he uses replicators. He uses amazingly detailed nature scenes. It's a pleasure to just look at them. And yes, he did that in Carrara and Vue, but since Carrara is no longer really officially supported by the people from DAZ, he started applying these principles to DAZ Studio scenes, and now he's building these things with DAZ Studio scenes. And he's from New Zealand, I believe, and one of the things he found is that the tools that he had in Carrara were just not available inside DAZ Studio, one of which was the replicator. So replicator is great if you want to give a tree some leaves, or if you want to add random kind of little stones along a path and all those types of things, where you basically build 3 or 4 stones and then you say, well, replicator, take these, vary their size and dot them around a map that is aligned with that object. And all of a sudden you've got this amazingly random / created phenomenal scene. And so Howie Farkes is the master of that. So he went ahead and built this script from scratch for DAZ Studio, and that the result of which is Ultrascatter. So let's have a look how we can use it. With the cube selected, we can kick off that script, and as soon as you do that, it'll bring up this dialog. And the dialog says, in essence, you've selected this object, you want to replicate it. Now, where do you want to replicate it? And this is where we can select the target object. So this is where the thing is going to go, which is namely on the plane. It already knows the source object, which is a cube. That's the one that was selected. And now you can tell it how many instances of this object would you like. So let's make it 500 and see what happens. And then you click that big button. It says surface scatter, and then DAZ Studio thinks about it for a moment, and in a moment we get a lot of these things dotted around our plane. And that's already very cool, because these are not copies of the same object. They also don't clutter up your scene view. If you can have a look at this, it doesn't clutter it up. It just has a group that says Ultrascatter Pro, and in it has these instances. So another cool thing is if you want to just amend what you've just done, you just select this Ultrascatter group, double click on the script again, and then the script is pre-populated with the things that you've just set up. So you can go and amend them. So right now, hello Olaf, good to meet you, good to see you again, very exciting. Welcome in the chat. The way this works now is that we have 500 objects or so dotted around our plane, and they are random, but they look all exactly the same. And while it would probably be kind of cool to have our character walk through this jungle of things, it does work. I mean, you know, there's definitely something going here. He may just, you know, bump into the odd thing, and they all look very uniform, so perhaps there's something we can do about it, and lucky for us there is. So if I go back to the very front of my animation, or in fact go back to the perspective view, I can first of all add some height variation to these sticks. And the way to do that is by just clicking the Ultrascatter Pro thing, the group that we've just created, double click the script, and then things are still the way I left them. So I can just go and scatter them again, and they'll look exactly the same. They'll just assume different positions. So I can also increase the amount of those things. Perhaps I'm going to go with 1000 and see what that looks like. Hit Surface Scatter. DAZ Studio thinks about it for a moment and thinks about it some more. There we go. More sticks. But again, they don't look any different than they did look before. So let's go back. Maybe 500 was actually a good amount. 1000 is maybe a little bit too much. So I'm going to go and go back and double click that script again. Set this back to 500. There we go. Let's go and have a look at the scaling option here. So maybe I'll do this. There we go. Then you get a closer look at this. But don't be afraid to look at all these options and go, oh my god, there's so much to look at. There is, but once you know what to tweak, it's actually fairly easy. So we want, in scaling, we want random scaling. So you can either scale the whole object from 2, so that's like the original object was 100%, and if you say you want the whole object to be scaled from maybe 80 to 120, then all the replicated objects will be somewhere between those limits that you've seen there. And you can also restrict this to a particular parameter. So in my case, I want the height to vary, but the diameter I'd like to stay the same. So I'm going to go and create a Y scale. I'm going to leave everything as it is, just Y scale from maybe, I don't know, 60 to 150, something like that. And that's, for now, that's how I'm going to leave it. I'm going to click Surface Scatter. And now we should have a bit of height variation in our sticks there. There we go, and it did work. Height variation. Some are bigger, some are smaller. I'm with Biscuits, by the way. I like 20-minute chunk size things as well, especially with things like substance. This kind of very complex subject matter. So, you know, I like it. 20 minutes is a good kind of guide. 10 to 20 minutes. And if it gets longer than that, just split it into 2 parts. I think that's a good guide. Oh, okay, I missed that question. Somebody was asking if this was how I did my spider scene. It was indeed, yes. I used the Ultrascatter Pro in the spider scene. That's exactly right. That's how I put the spiders on the floor and on the walls. That's exactly how I did it, yes. I think that's the first time I mentioned it. I've been meaning to make a more in-depth tutorial about that, but I haven't quite managed to do that yet. But hey, maybe it's going to come out bite-sized, like, you know, every time I do a live stream, a little bit more of Ultrascatter will kind of drip feed into this, who knows. So right now the sticks are height varying, but there's still no real predefined path for our character. And this is where kind of a density map comes in play. Once again, with the Ultrascatter selected and double clicking that script here, I can go ahead and do that under distribution. If you select distribution, you see this option here, image map. And do ignore all the other parameters. They're kind of, they're there when you need them, but if you don't, that's also cool. A density map is something that tells the replicator where to place objects and where not to place objects. So it's like a grayscale map. Black, I always get it wrong, but I'm just pulling this out of my head now. So black means please place objects here. White means please don't place objects here. And gray areas mean please put some objects here, but depending on how much color there is in there, go by that. So I'm going to go and choose something that I've made earlier. I've got two paths here. I've got this one, which is a path map. That's actually a real path. And I've got this one, which is just kind of a random, just a chasm in between there. We can have a look at both. Let's have a look at the path map first. Just add that there. You can see what this does. White means, so this is how it works. White means please place objects here. Black means please don't place objects here. I always get it wrong. It's one of those things. And when I now hit surface scatter, I can go and see what happens, because we should see a nice little path in between our objects. So they're not quite as densely scattered. So I suppose if I look at it from the top, I can just about make that out. You can see how that works. I suppose I need to increase my object density for that to become out more clear. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to have my character walk in a straight line for this demo anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and redo this and just change out the map for the second one I've just shown you there. So double click that with that map. Let's delete it here and go ahead and select my other one, which is this one, path map here. Boom. Surface scatter that, and we'll see what happens next. Here's our prototype object, and there we go. Now we can see that there is in fact a path for our character to walk in. We can even go and with the plane selected, we can make that plane a bit narrower. Whoops. Not that narrow, but now this should give the illusion of our character walking in between somewhat of a jungle or whatnot. Like a city scene. You can kind of imagine this to be a city scene. This is like a narrow road or whatnot, and the character walks through a narrow passage or something along those lines. And then of course you can go ahead and animate that. You can put something at the end, and Bob's your uncle, Betty is your aunt. So that's in essence how that works. Yes, and that's all I have. That's all I have prepared for you today. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, we have a few more minutes. Let me know. I'm really glad to see so many of you joining the chat. I really love it when this happens. And while I'm doing my thing, I tend to kind of keep half an eye on the chat, but sometimes I do miss questions, so I do apologize if that's happened. I usually spend an hour or so going through the chat afterwards, and if there's interesting links that we've brought up, interesting topics, then I'll usually respond to that either with comments or pick it up in the next video or so. Karen, what do you mean is there a way to change camera views on the timeline? Let me know, could you clarify this? There may not be on the timeline, but you can select the camera and then adjust the parameters of the camera, and all the adjustments that you are making, they're all keyframeable. So you can go and you can basically adjust anything, and that'll take on a keyframe value, if that's what you mean. But yeah, do clarify. Maybe I'll can give you an answer. Oh, 2 different camera views. Yeah, you can just go and create a second camera, and then I think we talked about this. Was also non-linear animation, and you can go and whoops, OBS is just disconnected from YouTube. What happened there? That is not good. Is it connecting again? Are we back on? Yeah, okay, cool. Whew. I just got this message here, very weird, that OBS has kind of disconnected from YouTube. Very scary when that happens. One of those things. Yeah, so there was this thing about building a coffee shop scene, and in that I had two people sitting around a coffee table, and I've created 3 cameras there. So that's a good stream to watch in order to get acquainted with that. But in essence, you would just go back to the perspective view and change things around to somewhere like maybe you want a front view of your character, just as an example. Front view, something like this. And of that, you can just go ahead and create another camera, copy the active view, perspective view, and we're going to call that one front camera. And then you've got another camera here that you can select between. So now you've got the front camera, which is not the perspective view, and you've got the third person camera. So the third person camera is now, that's parented to the character. But if you switch to the front camera, that's basically just the character moving towards the camera. So you can have that, and you can render that out as a separate camera. So comic book illustrators, they use that they set up several cameras and then just change the expressions on the characters' faces, and then you always have a close-up of person A, close-up of person B, and then you have a wide shot and maybe like a reverse shot, something like that. I can do, let me just dig it out. I will totally do that for you. Give me 1 second. Oh, great, Rod. Thank you so much. I'm going to watch that later. I've watched your previous videos, Rod. The Rod Fest I was talking about. That was very cool. I like that. That yacht is phenomenal. I must get hold of that. I haven't. Have you tried that in DAZ Studio, Rod? Rod 1, the luxury yacht. Okay, Karen, here it comes. This is the scene for the coffee shop stream. Well, if I can type properly. There we go. Watch it. It was very successful as well. It had 560 views already, and that's extremely successful for one of my live streams. Usually they have about 100, 200 views. This one was extremely successful. So yeah, watch it. It's many people found it exciting. So I hope it'll work for you too. There we go. I think that was it for today. Rod, I'm going to watch your video. I'm going to have a look at all the other links that you guys have posted. Christina, I'm going to totally have a look at your email, of course. Thank you so much for all your wonderful donations today through Super Chat and through Patreon. It is absolutely mind-blowing for me that this is happening. I really enjoy that. So thank you so much. Next time, we're going to, actually, what am I saying next time? Tomorrow, I'll be back. We're going to play Subnautica for Subnautica Saturday. We're going to go ahead and build that Seamoth, which is like a one-person submarine, and we're going to go and have a look at the mushroom or the jelly shroom cave. That's tomorrow, same time, same place, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I believe that is, I always get it mixed up, I think it's 9 p.m. in the UK and 10 p.m. in Europe, in most parts of Europe, and it'll be 9 o'clock in the morning the next day in Sydney, Australia. So perhaps Steve's going to join us. Who knows? He's usually asleep when I'm making these streams. I've changed the times, especially for him, so that he can join in as well. And yeah, it's one of those things. I'm not on Picato Guru. I don't actually know what that is, but thanks for letting me know about it. I'll have a look. Thank you, guys. I will see you perhaps tomorrow at 4 p.m. on this channel. My friends, take care. Bye-bye.